Alright, today we got the saddest UFC downfalls. Kicking off with the first guy, we got Dominick Reyes. In the UFC, Reyes was undefeated and was 12-0. After knocking out Weidman in the first round, he would earn his title shot against the consensus GOAT, Jon Jones. And going into that Jones fight, no one really gave Reyes a chance, and if they did, it was like a puncher's chance. So like all he's got is that left hand. No one thought Reyes would go out there and dominate Jones for 3 rounds, which is what Reyes did. Reyes fights Jon Jones, clearly wins the fight. Unfortunately for Reyes, however, he is robbed and he loses his fight against Jon Jones. And because I already know you guys are gonna say, oh, Jones didn't lose that fight. Okay, look. 14 out of the 21 media members there had Reyes winning. 75% of people who watched that fight had Reyes winning. Tons of UFC fighters came out, tweeted all that stuff. I thought Reyes won. Hell, even Dana White thought Jon Jones lost.
My kids are terrorizing me that the fix is in and how can this happen, Dad? Reyes won that fight. Going into the last round, I had Dominick Reyes 3-1 going into the last round.
So despite that actually being a win, it still goes as an L in the record books. But that was fine because everyone at that time thought that Reyes was going to be the next guy to like actually dethrone Jones in the rematch. Except there would never be a rematch. That's because Jon Jones would vacate his belt and move up to heavyweight. This means that Reyes would not get another chance at fighting Jones. And you know, with Jones, it's kind of weird, man. It's almost like he ducks guys that he thinks would beat him, you know. It's reminding me of something. Maybe a guy like Aspinall, he's doing that to right now, but who knows? Anyway. All is well. Dominick Reyes is going to get his belt against Jan Blachowicz at UFC 253. Unfortunately, in that Jan fight, Jan would be throwing body kicks, tearing Reyes up, and just kind of outclassed him and ended up knocking him out in the second round. And there's a big misconception in this fight, though, that a lot of people think Reyes lost because he didn't take Jan seriously because he just beat Jon Jones. That's actually the opposite, though. You know, reporters would ask him all the time, oh, you know, we thought you beat Jon Jones. How do you think you're going to do against Jan? And he'd just say, oh, it's a new day. It's a new opponent. And I don't care who it is. I'm coming for that belt. But, you know, all wasn't lost. He was still highly ranked and he was right there in the title mix. And so he tried to get that against Jiri Prochazka. Crazy enough, this was only Jiri's second fight in the UFC as he had just came off a KO over Volkanovsku, which shot him right up the rankings. In the fight against Jiri wins the first round, but it's still a competitive fight. Reyes is on his back and Yuri's trying to advance the position. I just want to point this out. Reyes upkick KOs Jiri. He literally knocks him out. Jiri said he was out, but it's whatever. He lands in full mount, advances the position. They separate, and then not a minute later, he knocks him out with a spinning elbow. Reyes, after this, you know, took a whole year off to try and reinvent himself for his next fight against Ryan Spann, because he always believed he'd already say 2 wins away, as in like 2 wins, and he's fighting for a belt again. Unfortunately for Reyes, Spann would knock him out in the first round. So to put this on perspective, Reyes went from being undefeated in the UFC, beating Jon Jones, being on top of the world, being the next big thing, to being knocked out in his last 3 fights. Reyes is currently ranked 15th, and he's going to be fighting Dustin Jacoby June 8th. And the thing about that fight is if he loses this fight, he's probably going to be cut from the UFC. All right, next one we got Tony Ferguson. In the UFC, he was on a 12-fight win streak, leading up to him getting the interim champ. You know, this dude was feared. Obviously, he was the boogeyman of the division. Tony's set to get that gold against Khabib, but the fight gets canceled 4 different times, with the most recent one being due to COVID. Since Khabib was out of the country, he couldn't get back into the US. So instead, Tony fights Justin Gaethje. This fight against Justin Gaethje is basically the beginning of the end for Tony Ferguson. In this fight that Tony was winning for the first half, Justin ends up rallying and ends up just beating him badly. It's to the point where the ref just waves it off while they're standing because Tony's taking so much damage. This is Tony's first loss in a while, but it's not really that big of a deal. You know, it's just a minor setback. He then fights Charles Oliveira on UFC 256, where he loses a decision, but in that fight, Charles Oliveira basically tore this dude's arm to shreds. He then fights Beneil Dariush on UFC 262, where he'd lose another decision, but having his knee ripped to shreds. And then he has a fight booked against Michael Chandler. This is at UFC 274, and this is like truly just the end of like the Tony Ferguson, like the El Kukui, because of one of the craziest knockouts I've ever seen in my life. Michael Chandler front kick KOs him. Like, this knockout was so brutal, the UFC really issued a mandatory rest for Tony because his brain was so fucked up. The love of competition would just keep dropping, and then he'd get submitted by Nate Diaz. And this one was brutal. He'd then get submitted by Bobby Green. This was Bobby Green's first submission in literally a decade since he fought Jacob Volkman on UFC 156. And that's just to show, like, Tony's level has dropped just a ridiculous amount. And recently he lost to Paddy Pimblett, which just absolutely sucks because Paddy Pimblett's horrible. Tony's downfall is probably maybe the worst just because he was never a champion, and I have a whole video on why he should have been champion. Check out my page if you want to see that. And he has taken the most brain damage. He's taken the most punishment ever. And the worst part is he has no plans of stopping. He's got that CSO champ shit only mindset. So just to recap this, Tony went from being the boogeyman of the lightweight division, even when Khabib was there, 12-win streak, interim champ, to an absolute fucking wash can that people are begging to retire because he can't win and he just damages himself every fight. All right, next one we got Cody Garbrandt, who's probably my favorite fighter of all time. Coming into the UFC, he was unbeaten, and he continued that going all the way up to 11-0, where he put on the greatest title fight performance I've ever seen, and by many people's accounts they've ever seen, against the consensus bantamweight GOAT in Dominick Reyes. And if you haven't seen this fight, you have got to watch it, because Cody Garbrandt literally looked perfect out there. He was knocking Reyes down at will, dancing on him, just evading everything, slipping everything, didn't get hit at all, basically. And, you know, to everyone sad that Cody Garbrandt's never going to do that again, just remember, can't paint the Mona Lisa twice, baby. Perfection's like lightning in a bottle, bro. So Cody Garbrandt's on top of the world. And that's until he fights the filthy gearhead fucking juice monkey TJ Dillashaw. For those of you who don't know, TJ used to train with Cody at Team Alpha Male, which was kind of led by Uriah Faber. Uriah Faber was 0-4 in title shots. He never got the gold. So Cody beating Reyes was a way of Team Alpha Male kind of as a whole getting the gold. TJ ends up leaving Team Alpha Male, and he's viewed as a snake, and they have a real personal beef, but it's all good because they're in a fight. In this fight, Cody fucking fights like a complete retard because he's taking this so personal. It's so mad. So he runs in there, tries to brawl, and actually get his lights put out. And, you know, this glass chin thing kind of held up because Cody would get dropped and then KO'd in the first round because he was fighting a little dirty rat PD juiced up freak who would get, you know, KO'd once he got off the gear. A year later at UFC 235, he'd get KO'd again by Pedro Munoz in the first round. Cody turned into a win one, lose one type of guy for the rest of his career. Right now, he's sitting at 3-3 in his past 6, but, you know, it's just pretty clear he's never going to be fighting for a belt or a top 5 ranking ever again. And this one sucks because Cody had such an inspirational story. You know, the kid with cancer, he was just such a good guy. And a lot of people were thinking we were looking at the next bantamweight go, you know what I mean? He had all the boxes ticked, the good wrestling, the good striking, and his chin, which, you know, is just God-given. You know, guys like Cheeto are born with it. Guys like Cody aren't. Just couldn't hold up. All right, this one's going to be a little bit controversial, but I'll explain it. We got Alexander Volkanovsku. And Volk's probably like my second favorite fighter, and just you can already see, just seeing him without that belt in that picture just doesn't feel right. And I just want to say with Volk right now, it isn't bad, but I can just tell it's going to get worse. You know, Volk, being the consensus featherweight go, had a 23-fight win streak with 5 consecutive title defenses going into that first fight with Islam. And in that fight with Islam, you know, you can argue he won. I thought he won. Still raised his stock a ton going against like a number 1 pound-for-pound guy like that, and easily giving him the toughest fight of his life. You know, so Volk's at his peak, you know what I mean? He then turned around and just whooped Yair Rodriguez's ass, and he's just once again on top of the world. That's when UFC 294 happens. Oh, God, it hurts me. Charles Oliveira gets his rematch against Islam Makhachev, but 2 weeks out of the fight, Charles gets a deep cut on his eye and he has to pull out of the fight. So Volk, being the legend he is, he steps in on short notice against Islam. Literally has 2 weeks to prepare. Goes out there, gets head kicked in the very first round, just put out cold. First knockout of his career, and first true loss in over a decade. See, this sucked, but, you know, people didn't hold it against Volk because, you know, he had a week's notice against the number 1 pound-for-pound guy going up a weight class. And because he went up a weight, he kept his belt. And Volk, being the guy he is, chose to defend his belt not even 4 months after he just got brutally head kick knocked. And of course, he defended his belt. Of course, he defended his belt against Ilia Topuria at UFC 298. And in that fight, you know what I'm saying, he looked good in the first round. He was throwing good leg kicks, keeping a range, until Ilia Topuria catches him with a bomb and just puts his lights out. And now for the first time in over 5 years, Volk is no longer a champion. And see, right now, where it is as of today, it's not bad. You know what I mean? This is just like, this could be for a lot of guys a skid in their career that they could recover from, but for Volk, it's different. Volk's already called for the rematch against Topuria, and he's going to get it. The only question is Topuria going to defend against Max and then get it and then go fight Volk, or is he just going to go right again back again to Volk? You know, Volk's 35. If he fights Ilya again, he's going to be 36. He's going to be getting any younger, just going to be slower, just going to be weaker, and if they have a rematch, Volk's getting knocked out again. And even though that sucks, 3 knockouts, it's pretty bad, but it's not the worst. And they'd only be against elite of the elite guys. But Volk, being the guy he is, you already know what's going to happen. If he loses to Ilya again, he's just going to start the path to gold again. I believe he's going to do that by fighting a tough contender like a guy like Arnold Allen, who will probably KO Volk. And then Volk's going to get sent down to a guy like all the way down to like Edson Barboza, and then Barboza will probably just knock him out, and it's just going to be like Tony Ferguson again, and he's just going to keep fighting, he's going to keep fighting, just keep trying to get that belt back, keep trying to win it, because he's just got that championship mindset, which is going to suck. And honestly, best case scenario is he fights like a guy like Aljo or Masvidal, who can't really like knock him out, can't do damage, and then he tries to go for that Yair fight. If he loses, he just calls it quits, but that's not that's not what's gonna happen. I know Volk, and he's just gonna go right back into the fire and probably get knocked out again. So to me, these were some of the saddest downfalls in the UFC. Some honorable, and I guess in this case dishonorable mentions that could have been in this list too, are Chuck Liddell, BJ Penn, Tyrone Woodley, and even like Darren Till. Sounded weird is because I'm 6'5". Currently getting my ass whooped by the flu. Shout out to Master Luck, who requested this video. This is the third video I've made for this dude, so you know what I'm saying. Comment some videos ideally, you'll probably get them. Thank you so much for watching. It's John Simmons, man.